Hi, and welcome into this Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland, and today we're talking about social media and how to make the most of your time and your advertising spend. But before we get into all of that, I want to tell you that we're coming to you today from Studio T inside the Telstra Customer Insight Center, 400 George Street in Sydney. An absolutely beautiful facility. If you've not had the chance to come on down and check it out, I highly recommend it. Please do it at your first earliest convenience. And thank you to the crew here for helping us put this presentation together. Before we get too far into the topic, I do want to let you know a little bit of what you can do with the platform. So feel free to play around. Along the bottom of your screen, you will see some resources tabs, also speaker bios. Find out everything you need to know about our speakers here today, and just about any sort of link that you would want there down in the resources tab. Also, this is designed to be an interactive presentation. We're going to go just as deep as you want to go. So feel free to submit questions during the course of the presentation. I'll interrupt our speakers, and we'll really just dive into as much detail as you want to get into. So, again, please do let us know whatever you want to talk about today. Also, join the conversation on Twitter. Use the hashtag #TelstraVirtualEvents. So, without any further ado, let's just dive into the topic for today. And that is simply social media and how to make the most of it. Now, let's be honest. We all use social media, sometimes perhaps at work a little more than we should. But the point is that your customers and potential customers are also on social media. You want to get to them. So what's the best way to do it, and what's the best way to engage them, not just for a quick sale, but for a long-term relationship? That's why I've got experts in the studio with me today and joining us via phone to talk about these very issues. I'm going to start immediately to my right, and that is Ross Wakeham from Facebook. Welcome, Ross. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Justin.
To his right is Darren Kepi from LinkedIn. Darren, thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
And joining us by phone is Sahil Jain. He is the CEO and co-founder of AdStage, joining us from Berkeley, California. Thank you, Sahil.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So before we get, again, too far into Ross's topic, and I'm going to hand it off to Ross here in just a moment, I want to get a sense of where you are in the audience. Let me know, by filling out the polling question you've seen just pop up on your screen, what is your biggest challenge or frustration with social media, and particularly with social media marketing? Is it turning your followers into customers? Is it making that long-term sale? Is it getting traffic to your website, and so ultimately the purpose of the advertising? Is it matching your social platforms to your customers? Is it how best to use and optimize social platforms? Or is it managing your productivity, making sure that you've got the right content? So, Ross, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you're obviously working with a lot of people in your role in Facebook. What are you seeing? And what are people coming to you saying, you know, this hasn't been working, or this is what I'm struggling with?
I think one of the biggest struggles that people have is really getting to understand who your audience is, who your customers are, and then ensuring that you're speaking to them in an appropriate way in newsfeed. Most people, I hope, use Facebook, and they know the environment that you're playing in with friends and families and other brands. And how do I find relevancy and speak in an appropriate way to, at the end of the day, sell my product? I think that's the biggest balance of selling versus fitting in.
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to keep coming back to during the course of the conversation is the fact that, you know what, a 20-year-old woman and a 50-year-old man both may shop at your store, but you can't use the same message to attract them. This isn't just taking out a one, square ad in the Sunday newspaper and tailoring a message for everyone. You can really dig into a lot of detail, but at the same time, that means you're going to become overwhelmed and you're going to have a lot of campaigns running, ultimately to have success.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we talk about personalized marketing at scale a lot at Facebook, and that's exactly that.
So let's get the results of our first poll question, and they're straight right across the board, though it looks like how best to use and optimize social platforms is one of the struggles that people are having the most. So we'll make sure that we run this through as we talk to you. So let's just go ahead and jump in a little bit about Facebook. Now, again, we've all been using Facebook for years. It's a great way to keep in touch with friends and family, and also it's a great way for friends and family to stalk us and find out what's going on in our lives. But take me through a little bit in detail here of Facebook for the business side.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a few slides that'll, I guess, help me sort of talk to the point and the story that I'm trying to say, and hopefully what I can show you is a little bit about the consumers and how they're using the platform, what their expectations are, specifically of brands and small businesses, and then how can small businesses act on top of these to get the best results. So in terms of me and what I do, I've been at Facebook for just over 2 years, and I work specifically in our tech and telco vertical, working with clients in that area. And normally when we speak at these events, I guess we try and find a personal story that's relevant to the audience. And to be completely honest with you, I haven't worked in a small business since I was at university working at a sports store. At a retailer. So I'm actually going to come back to that later on, and I'm going to apply some of the thinking and how we would have used Facebook had Facebook been around 10 years ago when I was part of that business. So
But that's actually going to be a little bit of a disturbing point for you. Facebook has been around for 10 years now.
We had our 11th birthday in February.
I'm starting to feel old, so thank you for that. So let's just jump into it. And one of the things I think is very important is to remember that Facebook particularly, and really all social media is about this, but it's about those interpersonal connections. And you as a business really can't view them as just a transaction. Yeah,
absolutely. And Facebook was built for people as a means of people to connect with each other, and that is still fundamentally why people will log into Facebook and why they'll use the platform. But that is sort of changing, and I mean, I included this slide almost to make 2 points, I guess, trends that we're seeing sort of across the platform, and one is a piece of research that we did called Aussies on Facebook, and we're basically trying to do some third-party research on how people are using the platform and how that changes over time. And if you think about what you're doing on Facebook 5 years ago, I can assure you it's very different to what you're doing right now. You probably weren't even using your mobile phone to log in. So huge change in how people are using the platform. But a big shift as well is that people are coming to Facebook not only to connect with friends and family, but also brands that are interesting to me, and news content that's interesting to me, and the sports team that I follow. It's become this aggregation of content, and I'm creating things that are specific to me. And that kind of leads into the second point, which is I'm creating this news feed specific to me, and I'm creating it because it's relevant to me. So if a brand is going to come into that environment, they need to make sure they find relevance for that person.
Yeah, now part of that is it's very obvious for me to say as a brand, well, I want to integrate myself into your life. But as a user, when I look at a brand, I'm very happy to hear from the local brewing company because, you know what, I go there fairly often. I really enjoy their product, so I want to hear from them. But if it's a brand that I'm not necessarily familiar with, but is sharing a message that I'm interested in, I'm very interested to hear it.
Exactly. And because you recognize that Facebook has this information about me, and Facebook should know this about me, so it should feed me relative content and ads. And that's the number one piece of, I guess, negative feedback that we get from our users, isn't the amount of ads.
Yeah.
It's that, hey, Facebook knows that I'm this demographic. Why am I getting nappy ads?
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Why am I getting hair product ads? I don't understand.
Exactly.
But I had a good question come in from the audience. Gregory in Sydney said he's a small independent retailer and they have a Facebook page and they post often. But they're, what should they do? But like posting offers, is that a good way to engage in a longer term relationship with a customer? Or what type of content do you see really succeed?
I mean, the way that we talk about content and Facebook strategies, you really have to start off, I think, with what is your objective right at the start. Are you a news store? You want to get awareness in your local area? Then a simple photo post might do. Do you have an online store and you want to make sure you're getting people through to that? Then you do things like a link post. So if it is a flash sale, then okay, I'm building this one piece of creative that speaks to that flash sale. It's live for only Thursday, Friday because it's irrelevant by Sunday. So it really is, I guess, first step, what is your objective? And then we've got a whole bunch of tools to help you identify what is the best creative to hit that objective, and then who is the audience.
Yes. So that's the one thing that I think is very important to balance, is that you should be able to balance out one objective, a flash sale, with a variety of different audiences. But one of the issues that people run into is that it simply becomes overwhelming. From your perspective, what's the best way to balance that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess when you're looking at the objectives...
Without saying, and I should clarify this too, it's easy to say, well, just hire somebody. But particularly for the small businesses, the mid-sized businesses that may not have the resources for that, or, it's somebody who's also doing that job, how do we address it?
Yeah. So, I mean, some businesses are going to inherently know who their customers are, and some don't necessarily know as much about them. Like, I point back to the example when I was working in a sports store, Sports Power, back in Adelaide, South Australia, and I could tell you that 90% of the people coming through the door were grocery buying mums that were doing shopping on behalf of their children.
Yep.
So maybe in that environment, there are two audience segments that I create. One is for mums about back to school and new product ranges and Easter sales, whatever it might be, and one is for let's call it pester power. So that is specifically to the son or the daughter, and they want the latest equipment. So
do you find do you find more success when you're working with say companies that are maybe smaller and have a more personal reach, or do you see any success with like enterprise customers perhaps reaching out, the gas company, which we all love the gas company. But, you know, do you see successes with those companies as well?
I almost think it's easier to be genuine as a small business on Facebook than it is as a large corporation.
Right.
So as a large corporation, you don't have a personality. You don't necessarily know what you stand for. Whereas if you're a small business servicing a relatively small area that's called the eastern suburbs of Sydney, you have a face to your brand. You have a background, you have a history, you're launching new stores. I almost think it's easier for those people sometimes on the platform to identify who you are and be genuine and speak in a way that rings true rather than trying to fake it.
Right. Well, ultimately, I know Bob is running the local pizza shop, and if I go down to the local pizza shop, I'm going to see Bob, and it's an easy conversational piece rather than a stilted piece.
Exactly.
Good. So let's run through some of the things. I mean, now people are sharing a lot of content, and content is somewhat ubiquitous on social media. You've got a picture here of some people having some dining. You know, it's kind of funny that we all think about you go to a restaurant and people are taking pictures of the food and talking about it on the internet rather than actually having the conversation with people in front of them. But at the same time, that's a wonderful experience on social media as well. People are sharing a ton of content, so how do you cut through that, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. So this slide is almost the analogy that Facebook is almost like a dinner party when you strip away the technology. It's different people having conversations about different things. Some are in isolation, some are broadcasting, and some are having more intimate conversations. And the way when you're talking about a brand, I've mentioned about being genuine, you got to think about who you are and who you'd be at that dinner party. So if you're Mr. Red Bull sitting at the dinner party, you're not going to be talking about the ingredients of the latest drink you've just created. You're going to talk about the fact that you just went bungee jumping out of a hot air balloon that day. And that might be seen as I guess an easy option because they're Red Bull and they're these amazing things. Doesn't really make sense for small businesses. But I'll bring the example back to a company that you can look on our Facebook and Business website. A case study we do, a company called Tumbletown. Sorry. They essentially make kids' creches and ball pits and slides, and you can hire them out for school events and parties. And they were typically taking ads out in the local newspapers and areas basically they could distribute this equipment to. And then they did a Facebook campaign, they made some posts, they targeted men and women of a certain age, quickly recognized that, okay, it's women that are engaging with our content and that it's content that's focusing on the children having a great time and the fact that it's an easy thing to set up as a fun option for kids at parties and at schools. And then you very quickly, by pulling these levers, I guess you identify who you are at that table. And my story is more interesting for women in that instance than it is maybe for men.
Right. So let's talk about it in terms of mobile, because obviously we're moving to a mobile society. Slowly, people are picking it up more often than they're picking up their computers. In fact, the slide we see up now, that we see that people are not only checking in on their mobiles, texting, but they're also doing social media. Where do you see this going, and then where do you see the role of marketing in that mobile space?
Yeah. So I mean, I won't talk to the numbers on that slide, except for the main one. It says 9 million people are logging onto Facebook on mobile every single day, and this device obviously gives you huge potential as a marketer because you're guaranteeing that someone is seeing your ad, and you're guaranteeing that you're speaking to a specific person rather than an environment or a destination. And one of the reasons I included this slide is, with mobile and some of the targeting you have, it allows you to understand I guess what levers do I have to pull to make my brand more relevant? So we have easy ones like age and location and demographic. Another one, the fact that people are logging on 14 times a day on mobile means that you can start to do day parting really easily. So one case study or example that I'll speak to is we do a lot of work with a hospitality group here in Sydney. They've got restaurants and bars. And I mean, they know that people make a decision to go to one of their venues typically between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. Thursday through Sunday. So they can get huge efficiencies just by turning on a message that tells people to do exactly that at that time. So you can start to think, okay, what are the day of week or time of day that's relevant for me? So every product's going to have a different way of getting cut through and achieving relevancy. So if I'm sitting at my desk thinking about what I'm doing that night and I get a Facebook post about an offer in a local restaurant, that's going to get cut through.
Right. Yeah. So then and we've got a ton of questions that are coming in, and thank you guys for that. So keep them coming. We'll definitely have time to get through them. But I think the part of your issue here is that you need to target for relevance. You need to know exactly who it is you're talking to and what their needs are and how they behave. So take us through how do you target?
Yeah, sure. So this slide kind of talks to the three, I guess, main buckets that we of targeting that we have on the platform. So core audience on the left there is, I guess, the targeting that you expect Facebook to have. So that's the age, location, sex, time of day, for example. So in my example, in the Sports Power, we would have targeted women 30 to 55, and that would have been it.
Yeah.
But then what the problem is that's still a very large bucket of people. You probably want to apply more filters of that to make sure you're speaking to exactly the right people and finding the low-hanging fruit. And we had, in our store, we had a list of about 300 mums that had signed up to an EDM that we'd send out, Easter holidays, school holidays, new deals, whatever might be relevant at the time. And the challenge with an EDM is it took us so long to create it, and you don't know who's reading it, and it's hard to track who's coming to your store afterwards. So custom audience is the next bucket there, kind of talks to that. It's essentially in a data safe way, you can identify these people as per their email addresses onto the Facebook platform. So these 300 people that you had on an email list become 200 people sitting in your Facebook interface that you can send a message to, and that appears in their mobile phone, and you can guarantee that they're seeing it, and you can track whether they're going to your website or coming in store or whatever the objective is for that specific piece. And then, which kind of takes me on to the final one is, those 300 people are great, but it's 300 people. It's not exactly critical mass for me to start making a huge profit
off of that audience.
Exactly. So lookalike audience is essentially looking at those 300 people and within the Facebook environment and what information we have about them, who old they are, where they live, who they're engaging with, what brands they engage with, and then trying to find a bunch of other people that look like that people. So all of a sudden that list of 300 people for Sports Power Adelaide becomes a list of 5,000 people or 20,000 people, and they become the next bucket we send.
Slightly different, but ultimately good. And that brings us
up the scale.
Exactly. So that brings us in now to the Mishka example. So take us through very, very briefly because we want to move on, so we have more time for questions. But take us through the Mishka example.
So Mishka's an online fashion label that launched two years ago, and actually launched on the Facebook platform. This girl, she had a passion for fashion and thought Facebook was the best way for her to get in as an easy option and minimal cost to do so. So literally took 20 photographs of models wearing her designs, put them up on the Facebook page, and then invited her friends to come and start liking the page and buying products via emailing her through the posts. And then within sort of 2 months, everything had sold out. Okay, I've got that problem now. I've got those 300 people, but I need 30,000 people because I'm selling out of stock. And then essentially what Mishka did was use those audiences. So who do I know about who's currently using my campaign? How can I make that a bigger bucket of people? What content is working? Does the red dress work better than the green dress? Okay, we need more of the green dress. And then you build and iterate and you learn over time. And they've had huge success with that. And they're still driving all of their sales through the Facebook platform.
So I've just thrown up a slide here. You can just learn a little bit more about how Facebook deals and interacts with small businesses. And Ross, we'll jump back to you in just a minute here, but thank you for that. So I do want to move to Darren Cappy from LinkedIn. Darren, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll start off with another polling question. This was for you out in the audience, which is, what challenges have you faced in paid advertising? Is it not enough time to manage them? Do you find that you don't have enough resources, be that monetary or strictly time? Is that poor campaign performance? Is you're just not doing what you think they should be doing? Is it a lack of platform knowledge? There's a lot out there, and we've just talked about how there are so many different things. Or is it just a combination of all of the above? So feel free, click on there and let us know. And Darren, when people are coming to you, what are some of the complaints they're having about not just traditional advertising, but digital and social advertising as well?
I guess fortunately they're not tending to complain that much these days. We're seeing, as Ross said, a lot of engagement with content. So provided they are able to locate and then publish that content regularly, they're getting great engagement with their audiences when they require it. I guess as far as like some of their concerns, I guess it's like how they start to turn those relationships into sales outcomes and specific leads for them. And a lot of that is about, I guess, giving a sufficient amount of goodness that they build trust and credibility between their brand and the particular target audience they're after. And that once they've done that, and I guess they've earned the right to be able to sort of reach out with special offers, that they do that in a clear and concise manner that's very timely and gets the job done from a lead generation perspective. And, fortunately, we're seeing some really good results lately.
Yeah, and speaking of results, in our poll, all of the above. People just seem to struggle with the platforms generally, which I think is a good reason that you are here, is to kind of demystify some of the offerings. And one of the things that I would highly recommend is both Facebook, LinkedIn, they have staffs here in Sydney and scattered around the country. One of the things to do is just pick up the phone sometimes and talk to them about the issues that you're having. It may not be immediate, but you'll get some resolution, you'll get some help. And I know there are a lot of communities out there that are very happy to help as well. So let's talk through some of the LinkedIn marketing solutions, because it's a growing field, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. So I guess first and foremost, so LinkedIn is a professional network, and that's, I guess, what differentiates it specifically when we talk about, the other social networks. We have quite a considerable a range of particular solutions there. But I guess first and foremost, for most of us, it's probably your digital CV or your professional profile of record, and it forms a basis for how you actually, present yourself on the internet as an individual. As a business, as a marketer, it's getting very tough. As Ross alluded to, mobility is becoming a huge issue, and people have got these huge, tiny little powerful computers in their pockets, which gives them access to information at all times, and they're getting bombarded with so much information. So for all marketers, it's about how do I get that cut through, how do I get that effective message to my particular target audience, which it encourages them or incents them to do something, that's going to give me an outcome as a business. So I guess from our perspective, there's a couple of things in marketing solutions that we think of. For a lot of brands, it's about reach and frequency and creating that audience awareness that they actually exist. And the first and most important point for doing that, I guess, is to set up a company page and a presence on our platform. And fortunately, we've got millions of happy customers that are doing that. And once you have got that page or that presence, to then start to publish content frequently to drive that engagement and to build that audience. And the most successful ones will actually garner a huge selection of followers that they can continue to evolve that relationship with and build their business from there.
Right, and I think you've got a group of people who use LinkedIn who are very interested in not just cat photos, and cat photos are great, cat videos are great, I love them, but you've got people who are actually looking at getting substantive information from strangers, which is a little bit different, I think, than Facebook, which is designed to interact with your existing friends and family, maybe make some new friends, but it's for your existing circles, whereas people are looking to reach out through LinkedIn.
Absolutely, great point there. And I guess we think often about the idea that, if content is king, and that's a bit of a cliche, but it's something that gets brought up regularly, that context is the queen. And to have the relevant professional audience thinking about business-related content is critical. And I guess when we did our Audience 360 survey most recently, we found there's three things that people are most interested in. And that is, firstly, business news and current affairs around the ideas of business-related content. So we're seeing a lot of interaction there. Also, they're interested in career information and how they can get their next gig, perhaps get the next role in their particular sort of career path that they're after, or to find a new job, some new challenges for them. Yeah. But last but not least, and probably most poignant for the audience today, is that they're really interested in hearing from brands and hearing brands are giving them information that's relevant and valuable to them. It's also really important to note that, of all the content shared on the LinkedIn platform, that there's 7 times more general content about business and from brands than just pure recruiting information, which is still an important element of the overall environment of the platform.
Now, I'm going to stop you there because you've used a word a couple of times that I think is the sexy marketing buzzword these days, and that's content. When people are engaging, when you say content, you mean photos, you mean blog posts, you mean sharing just an update. I mean, there are a variety of things that constitute content. But what do you find is the most successful? I mean, it's hard to quantify that, I know. But generally speaking, what do you find are the most successful posts to LinkedIn? From businesses particularly?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, as far as genuine how many clicks I can get through to my site. It's about having a distinct piece of information that I want to learn more about.
Yep.
And that can be presented in something like an infograph or an image or an arresting headline or a key bit of information that really gets you, excited about, gee, I'd like to find out more about that. And brands are doing great jobs also, I guess, about storytelling and getting people more aware and in touch with, what they're about and where they can actually, benefit them from either personal perspective or from a business perspective as well. And fortunately, our audience is a little bit duplicitous in that sense that you've got the professionals who are looking for their own needs, so their holiday or their car or their computer or their smartphone, etc. But they might also be buying a cloud computing solution or a new fleet of trucks or something for their actual business. So there's a whole range of ways that we can connect and communicate with them. And we typically talk about this idea of content marketing scores or engagement as being sort of the measure of success there. And that's when we see that the people are clicking on content, they're socially engaging with it, they're liking it, they're sharing. But I guess most importantly, they're also following brands, putting up their hand as an advocate and saying, I'd like to hear from you in an ongoing manner, and enabling that brand to build an earned audience, which is a really sort of powerful statement from that particular member as well.
Yeah. So LinkedIn is a platform that I think has gone through, we talked about it with Facebook too. These platforms are changing yearly significantly. When I thought of LinkedIn, when I joined in 2007, it was a place where I put my resume online with a cute little headshot, and that was all it was. And it was a job searching site, and it has grown to be so much more. And it continues to grow, not only here in Australia, but internationally as well.
Absolutely. If you think about it, we'd like to refer to ourselves as the definitive business publishing platform, and we now have 347 million professional members globally. The interesting stat, I guess, there is that that's growing at 2 new members every second, or 200,000 new members every day. And increasingly, we're seeing an evolution of people consuming more and more content, not just being so job-centric and how they can get the best sort of professional, career outcomes there. In Australia, that boils down to 7 million professional members in the Australian market as well, which is, something that we're really proud of, and it's over a 90% penetration of the professional audience. One sort of side note for those who are interested, students are our fastest growing segment in the audience, as we see them starting to get active about where they'd like to get internships or where they'd like to get some work experience to fulfill their career ambitions and goals as well. It's really interesting.
Hadn't even thought of that. So this slide may be a little bit overwhelming at first because, frankly, there are a lot of things now that you can do on LinkedIn, which is fascinating and fantastic. But, that's kind of why we're here today, is to ultimately boil some of this down. And this is another thing where, get in touch with Darren and his team. They'll help you work through if you have questions. But
Absolutely. So I guess most people in the audience would be, as marketers, familiar with the idea of a funnel, and as that's a mechanism to actually, I guess, illustrate people's progress through a decision-making process. We know from our research that in many cases that people are 60 to 90% through their decision-making process before they reach out to brands, because they've got all this information, this access to information. So what we have developed is, I guess, a full funnel marketing solution which enables us to help brands engage with their audiences throughout that decision-making cycle, and it all points through there. So we go from very broad content sharing sort of type solutions, which can build that sort of engagement. We have that sort of level there. We also have very targeted solutions as well, things like sponsored emails. And then finally, once people have been to your site, we actually have lead nurturing solutions now that can actually identify them and share specific content that relates to both their behavioural online or their digital body language and how they actually, where they're up to in the decision-making process. And last but not least, and I think this is really critical for all digital advertising, there's the full analytics solution that comes with that to measure and monitor the effectiveness and to look at the outcomes, so that when you are investing on the platform, you continue to get the best return on investment and continue to optimize that performance over time.
Excellent. So really quickly, let's run through the example of BT, because they use this to sort of reinforce their message repeatedly, which I think is fantastic. Absolutely.
So BT Financial Services is a very large organisation that provide a range of financial solutions to the market, and they have been working with LinkedIn on a particular product called Sponsored Updates, which is our hero content marketing solution to promote interesting stories to their target audience. And as you'd probably be aware, they've got superannuation solutions, investment products, and a range of solutions that are all of high interest and high awareness to the professional audience because of the salaries and incomes that they're able to earn. So when BT started publishing this content, one of the great pieces that they posted was what's the value of a stay-at-home mum? And it's quite a sort of arresting headline in the sense that, probably people are aware of the immense value of a stay-at-home mum, but they've never sat down to actually calculate out the actual cost that it would be to replace that person. So in this particular instance, the study was done and conducted, and the value was found out to be, not that it's that critical to the story, but $128,000 to pay someone to actually fulfill those roles that a stay-at-home mum takes. And I bet that that would be considered conservative by a lot of people. The point of the story is that they are then using that as a captivating story to then ask people to, with that knowledge, would you be considering doing income protection insurance to protect that asset or protect that resource, that if that ever happened, you had protection?
Some great follow-up questions. It gets you into conversation, which is ultimately, I think, the purpose. So that's excellent.
And can I just mention the results that they had with those particular content is they've actually reached out to over 1 million of the Australian audience with the content and driven 100,000 visits to their site off the back of that information as well. So it's been a really successful vehicle for them to drive traffic and interested traffic to their site.
Yeah, so we'll talk about scaling that in just a moment, but I want to reach out to you again in the audience and ask you the question. So how do you currently measure KPIs for social media? Is it you measure your likes, your shares on social channels? Is it sales opportunities? Is it your website tracking? Is it all of the above? Or do you outsource it to a monitoring agency? Or altogether, you just don't have a KPI. You don't know how to judge that success quite yet. So let us know there in the platform, and we'll get those results tabulated in a moment. And turn to the very patient man who is joining us from the Bay Area, and that is Sahil Jain, who is the CEO and co-founder of AdStage. Sahil, thank you very much for taking a few minutes and talking with us. So take me through, how do you judge success using the AdStage platform?
Right. So thanks for having us, be a part of this meeting online. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to dive into this. I think just to kind of dovetail off of the question that you guys just asked, my guess is that it's going to be more of all of the above. I think that it really depends on a couple of things that these guys have been talking about, which is the objective you have for your given campaign. Based on the various objectives that you actually have, you're going to be measuring different things, right? So if your actual objective is simply brand awareness or content awareness, you're going to be measuring maybe the engagement on the post, things like likes, shares, and comments, and how much reach you actually get. If you're focused more on what we call in the industry direct response campaigns, or DR campaigns for short, then you're going to be tracking more conversion-based KPIs, right? So how many people actually signed up for a piece, a white paper maybe, or how many people actually went to my site and signed up for the given product. And so as you can see from the poll results, and unfortunately in some cases we still need to do a better job collectively as an industry to help identify what KPIs you should keep on track. Aside from that, you can see the second most responded answer is here's all of the above, right? So again, we can see that because various folks have different types of opportunities that they're running these campaigns against. And so it's our job as technology providers, in our case at AdStage, or as network solution providers, in the case of Facebook or LinkedIn, to help elucidate these various KPIs that you can see as a marketing professional.
So let's jump into to the AdStage platform and really kind of take us through not just Facebook and LinkedIn, which are fantastic, but also one of the problems right now with social media is it's become so segmented. We've got the different platforms that are just continuing to grow in popularity. So how do you make the most of the various ones and digital screens like Bing, like Google, like Twitter, so that you can really engage that audience?
Yeah, you bet. So, we chatted about, as you mentioned, we chatted about Facebook, we chatted about LinkedIn, both up-and-coming networks that are doing incredibly well against the behemoth that we all know about, which is Google, right? And so a couple of things to kind of note is while we're talking about social media, it's important not to forget about search as well. So, of course, I'm going to make sure that we cover Twitter just because the poor guys don't have anyone to vet them here. But, Twitter is very unique in their network. We'll start with Twitter mainly because it's a lot more unique in that the timing it takes into account, right? So Twitter is a real-time network. We really, we can say that LinkedIn and Facebook also have real-time elements, but Twitter is very, very much real-time. A lot of their content is very short-lived. And so for that reason, you have to really approach it in a method where you're taking advantage of perhaps it's live events. You're taking advantage, for example, just like this web event that we have going on right now. But what's important to keep in mind as well is not to forget about search. So search networks, in this case, we talk about Google or Bing. It's important to realize that, when you're really trying to figure out your core KPIs, you need to take a quick step back. And the first thing you need to do is think about what makes each of these networks or channels really unique. And what I mean by that, to make it even clearer, is how do people actually use these channels? How does the end consumer actually use these channels? So how is someone using, Twitter? How is someone using Google? Well, in Google's case, it's more focused around capturing a certain intent, right? You're searching for something. You're trying to find an answer. In Twitter's case, or Facebook or LinkedIn, you're consuming, right? You're browsing things. You're browsing content, or you're engaging with friends. And for that reason, you have to tailor your message or your advertisements appropriately, right? So let's actually dive into Twitter a little bit further and talk about, we talk about Twitter being this public network, just like Facebook and LinkedIn. Social's big thing is that it's public. But a couple things to keep in mind is, your presence on Twitter can be seen by anybody. It's really, really exposing the transparency between a brand and an end user, right? So as your brand, when you're trying to get your message out there, both, from an organic standpoint, when you're just posting messages on Twitter, or from a paid standpoint, where you're then promoting a given message or a piece of content, you have to note that it's fully public. Everyone is able to see these messages. And so therefore, you have to be mindful of how you tailor the given messages. So from an organic standpoint, and by organic, I mean simply whenever you post a tweet on your given page or on your given, timeline, anyone can see that given tweet, right? It's going to go to your followers, but again, if someone retweets it, others can engage in it as well. What's interesting from the advertisement perspective is you can then take an organic tweet, you can promote it to a very specific segment of your given users that you're excited about, or to people that don't even know your brand today, but you want them to get engaged with a given brand, right? So it's important to make sure that you're actually promoting these to a specific audience so that you don't waste views or impressions on folks that aren't going to actually buy your solution or aren't interested in your service. So that's the Twitter side. But as mentioned, it's really important that even though we're talking about social, you can't forget about search, because all of these networks are, fundamentally unique, and they play with one another, right? So if you think about it, if you kind of go back into, let's call it the old ages, which you guys are probably going to laugh, but let's talk about, even 5 years ago, when Facebook and LinkedIn were just sort of getting there when it came from the advertising perspective. But what they had was Google, right? So let's talk about Google. Google started as both a search network and a display advertising network. So the display network are those banners that you see that chase you all around the web, right? And then your search advertisements are those right-hand rail advertisements you see when you actually search for something. Now, a lot of us as more sophisticated marketers in the audience will know it's really important to actually use both. Because what you're doing here is on the display campaigns, you don't actually expect people to click on those banners. You simply want your brand or your image to be plastered all across the web. What you're hoping then is that those users, a portion of those users, a very small portion, will then kick off an actual search. So in this case, we have folks who are actually searching for cross-network ad management platforms, right? And in that case, that's when an ad for AdStage is going to pop up. And hopefully that user who's seen that ad on the search results page saw one of our banners and said, you know what? I actually trust that brand. I saw it somewhere before. I'm going to click through and see it a little bit more. I want to explore this. And so what's happening with social media today with Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter is they're actually extensions of display networks. They're basically a larger display network in a social context, and hopefully you're still using Google and Bing to capture that intent.
Beautiful. Well, let's jump briefly into the platform and run through some of the potentials here, because one of the reasons that we're here is, as you say, segmentation is excellent. You want to be everywhere where your customers are potentially, but that means you're going to run out of time ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's exactly why, hopefully at this point you guys are like, you guys are thinking to yourselves, well, how in the world am I supposed to manage these different networks? There's so many different things to keep in mind. Well, enter AdStage. That's kind of the reason why we built the product, which is we wanted to build a really simple self-serve platform where we actually integrated all 5 PPC networks or native networks today that we think are the most important, so Google, Bing, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, into a single platform. So this way you can actually execute all of your campaigns, you can manage them, you can optimize them under one roof, as opposed to having to keep track of them in all of these disparate different interfaces today. And so the big challenge, which you guys mentioned earlier, is there's a massive amount of fragmentation happening in the market. There's so many different things that you have to keep in mind, that you have to keep track of. On a given time, let's say that there's the cricket tournament's coming up, or the Super Bowl just happened. In that case, you may want to shift some of your budget over from Google and Facebook over into Twitter, because for a few days there's going to be a real-time focus on that given event. And so at AdStage, we built this self-serve cross-network ad platform to help you manage all those things under one roof. And that's what we're really excited about today. And so just to, end on the AdStage portion, we're really trying to build these tools for the mass market. We're not just building for the Fortune 500 who historically have had these types of tools. We're trying to build an open self-serve platform for everyone in this space, whether you're a big company, a medium-sized company, or a small company. But without further ado, I think let's jump into some fun stuff with Q&A.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Sahil, and we'll keep you involved in this conversation. From this point on, it's all your questions, so feel free to submit them via the Q&A box there on your screen. But before we get to that, let's ask you one last question, you in the audience. When creating messaging for your social media marketing activities, what do you struggle with the most? Is it just the time commitment? Because you have to put in time. It's not just a one-way. Ultimately, to have success, you need to have engagement. Is it restraint? Is it having the right content? Is it writing for that very specific audience? Or is it having relevant content? Again, cat videos on your Fortune 500 page. When you guys experience content, what do you see out there in the marketplace? What succeeds and what are the struggles?
Do you want to take this? I'm happy to... I mean, it's easy for a user to identify when it's good content or bad content on a personal level. And I guess back to the point that I made before, we sort of tell brands to almost create like a user experience matrix. So who am I speaking to, and where are they in the purchase funnel, which Darren mentioned, and then what is a relevant message to them at each stage of that. And if you start thinking this way, then it's inherent that your tone and the way you're coming across, and not being too salesy, should fall in the right place. So from a user, you should see, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me. So always try and flip it and imagine yourself on the other side, hopefully being delighted by what you're seeing.
Right. So one of the things that, in terms of content, Sahil, we'll get to you in just a second here, and I'll pull up the results while we're there, and that's the time commitment, and it looks like the making sure you've got the specific audience so that you're not writing too broad. Yeah, it seems like content restrictions are a problem. Sahil, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, at AdStage, and I'm sure you guys see this at Facebook and LinkedIn as well, is that our big focus, the way that we actually do user acquisition today, is through content marketing. So we build a ton of content. On our blog today, we have 180 blog posts, but none of it has to do with AdStage. So I think another thing that's really important today is, certainly content is difficult to create. That said, if you're a brand where you have a certain type of expertise, it's really important to not create self-perpetuating content. It's really important to create content that is hyper valuable to whatever, type of user you're trying, or end user or customer you're trying to target. And so that's something that we found a lot of value in, is we don't talk about AdStage in any of our content. All of our content is how-tos and guides for digital marketers. But what happens is that content is highly relevant to what our end solution is anyway. And so if people actually like that content that simply makes them better at their job, then hopefully they'll have more trust in our product. So we've found success in that.
Yeah. Well, that brings up one of the questions about content, and you see the sponsored icon show up. That's one of the ways that content is promoted. Do you find any negative reactions from people? Because despite it all, and understanding that we're supporting local businesses, that we're supporting the platforms that we're using, we still have a distrust or a distaste, perhaps, for advertising. Do you see any problems? And maybe, Darren, we'll start with you, with the sponsored button showing up, and do people react poorly to that? Or is it a function of targeting, that if you've got the right person and the right message, that they're happy to see it?
I think you're absolutely right. And as I mentioned earlier, our members say they're looking for brands to share content with them, and the brands are saying, we want to target specific audiences that are going to find our information relevant. So there's a really nice nexus there that occurs, and we find generally that content that is shared by brands is as effective, if not more effective, than much of the personally generated content that people are putting out through their own networks, or the content that publishers are sharing through their company pages as well, because it is targeted and it's done with a sort of purposeful intent. And the other thing, like Sil said, it's about getting that sort of like goodness, or that content that's actually sharing value for people. If you always think about what are our core themes that the brand wants to talk about, is it about thought leadership? Is it about technical prowess? Is it just about, great workplace culture and things like that? These are sort of brand sort of concepts that are really at home in the LinkedIn professional environment. If you do something that's totally left field, it might work once or twice, but over time people are going to see it as a bit of a gimmick, and it won't be as effective in the long term. But definitely testing things out, using a variety of content, and last but not least, taking the data, taking a good look at it, who's engaging with it, are they our target audience, and we can continue to optimize the conversation we're having, just like you would as if the person was sitting next to you and having a conversation over a coffee or something like that, to make it valuable for them.
Yeah. So Ross, one for you. We had a question in from the audience from Patricia, which was dealing with the struggles of creating content. Now, obviously, all of us would love to have the time to sit down and write a blog, source articles. What do you have for recommendations for brands, particularly, number one, finding their voice, and number two, really just finding the right content to share?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to make an assumption that most people listening to this webcast right now, they're not brand advertisers. So you typically get to a critical mass and you start becoming brand advertisers, and you're producing long-form content and having webinars and other such things that large corporations have the capacity to do.
Right.
Whereas with smaller business, you don't have to do it. So when I say content, I'm not talking something that should take you hours to create and get the pros and copy right. I'm talking about, if I was Sports Power and I was selling tennis rackets before the Australian Open to mums trying to get their kids to do it, like, it's literally something as simple as taking a photograph of someone in the store with a tennis racket, or getting to go in the park and taking a photograph and adding 4 words, because that's how people are used to consuming content.
Right.
They're used to a photograph which is relevant in context, and it gives you a bit of a call to action, and if I'm more interested in that, I can click through.
Right.
So again, it's finding the low-hanging fruit. A lot of the time, like in the Sports Power example, like, they don't want to read like an article that Sports Power has written about the growth of tennis in grassroots Australia. They just want to know that the tennis racket is available for half price on Saturday.
Right.
So that's an easy piece of content to create. So identify who the low-hanging fruit are, go after those people. With time, you'll scale up more, and then maybe it'll be the more difficult content to produce. But I would argue that content for, I think, most of this webinar shouldn't be too difficult to produce.
So, Sahil, let's run it out to you. And in terms of the content, now you work with a variety of different platforms. Do you see any big differences in the ways that people interact between a variety of platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the most difficult, but also the biggest opportunity with these different social networks is these guys will tell you they're far smarter than I am when it comes to this stuff, but they'll tell you that, each of their networks are fundamentally different. Now, they're not just saying this because they want to make sure that their stock performs well. I mean, Darren touched on the fact that he wanted to press at the beginning that LinkedIn is fundamentally focused on a professional network. It's a highly affluent network. You're targeting professionals with a high buying behavior or high purchase power. In Facebook's case, you're targeting folks that might be family, friends. You also have those professional overlaps, especially, for example, in Japan, where everyone actually uses Facebook mainly for professional purposes, right? And so I think that the way in which people engage with different pieces of content simply depends on the type of content that's being created. If it's a piece of content that's for an event, or if it's a piece of content that's for help content to really make you better at your trade, they're going to engage with it by consuming that given piece of content, right? They're clicking on that piece of content with hopes to go to an article or a white paper. If it's more direct response type of content where they're trying to get you to buy a service or buy a product like an AdStage, for example, then it's going to be more focused on pushing them to a landing page where there's a conversion event that they're looking to have happen. Right. And so for all these advertisers that are on the call today, it's really important to always sit back and think about what is your core goal, but more importantly, how are each of these different networks unique? The biggest problem we found is a lot of advertisers will unfortunately just assume that, hey, the same ad that I use on Google, just spread it across all 5 networks. Right. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we just want that conversion. The really beautiful, more sophisticated technique comes into play when you leverage each of the unique pieces of each of these networks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you don't want to just repurpose the Twitter ad on Facebook. It just doesn't seem to look right. You want to be able to get things that are meticulous and look good, because ultimately people are skimming. And, they're not looking for, oh, gee, I wonder what Telstra is going to say today. No, but they come across it, and if it's well manicured and it looks good, then they're happy with it.
Yeah, we talk about being
one quick example that I didn't mean to interrupt. Just one quick example I thought was really interesting as a case study for LinkedIn was, we were working with a really big corporation, and they were trying to increase diversity within their organization with the people, their employees. And so they actually leveraged, instead of posting their job posts on Craigslist and Monster and all these different job sites, they actually decided to put that same budget into LinkedIn ads where they targeted different ethnicities, right? So specifically targeted different ethnicities with a certain age range, and to actually get applicants from different diverse groups. And it worked incredibly well, right? And that's something that's very specific to the LinkedIn network, as an example.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit. I've had quite a few questions come in about dealing with a B2B audience, and I think there's an obvious link there for LinkedIn. But people are asking, how do I use Facebook for B2B, or particularly for scaling up? Anybody bigger than a small business? Small business seems easy, seems obvious. Local pizza shop. So how do I scale up and still have success on Facebook?
And specifically within a B2B.
Well, even B2B or any sort of larger business. do you take a different track? I mean, again, cat videos, can't just use cat videos on the Telstra page.
Yeah, sure.
So what do you do for good content there that's engaging, ultimately?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that you need to, I think, approach Facebook, because I'm sure is the same as the way you want to approach LinkedIn. It really is a test and iterative sort of approach. Like you're going to, and in the example of a pizza shop, you want to try 3 different things. You'll learn quickly that one of them works, or this piece of content works for uni students, and this piece of content works for mums who are trying to for time-saving alternatives to making a meal. So it becomes like this test, learn, and iterate, and then hopefully after a month, 2 months, 6 months, it becomes a self-oiling machine,
right.
and you know what works, and then maybe you can increase your geographical footprint, or you can use tools that I spoke about before, assuming that you've spoken with your low-hanging fruit, being your own customers, identifying them on Facebook, and then you're trying to find other more like-minded people would be the obvious next step.
So one of the things I just did, and I apologize for this, Darren, is I pigeonholed you into a B2B network. But you mentioned before that university students are one of the largest growing segments of your business. So a question came in from the audience. Well, does that change the behaviors and engagement of senior management and decision makers based on the audience that's in LinkedIn? Do you see any changes to the way that things are performing or any targeting?
Absolutely. So as you said, like we are very much a definitive B2B publisher and potential opportunity for advertisers, but equally high consideration B2C is definitely like a big area. And education is one of the sort of, again, the fastest growing segments, both from a new students going into which course should I do, which studies should I pursue to achieve my career goals. So there's then again that logical sort of connection to LinkedIn, but also for established students who've got degrees and would like to progress in their careers and go on to do things like masters and things like that. So if you're talking to that younger segment and about which college they should go to or which university they should go to get a certain career outcome, then we have those sort of solutions, and those universities could hold open days or information sessions and publish content about success stories that have been to their universities. On the flip side, if you're an MBA producing organisation like the UQ Business School, who ranks sort of 4th in the region, you want to be flagging that to all the particular candidates who've got degrees. So you use our targeting tools to eliminate those people who don't have degrees and may not be eligible for MBAs, and then to basically target those that are have the highest propensity to actually apply or want to find out more about it. And that sort of type of targeting principle applies to many solutions for many clients. We very much sort of steer away from hyper-targeting because you might miss out on some great engagement and connection. But if you start targeting audiences with a bit broader net, find out what's performing best for you, and then you can optimize and continue to sort of zero in on which areas of our audience perform most effectively for you as a business.
Yeah. I had a question come in from the audience, and I apologize, didn't get the name, but if you are a small business, and Sahil, this for you, if you're a small business that's new to digital advertising and you're looking for a how-to for all of these platforms, where do you even start? Because as I mentioned, some of the back ends are very different. Where do you start to look for how to market?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, just to give a selfless plug right here, we built our blog, which is all about how-tos and guides for early advertisers and just people getting started, so that we could create a central repository for this type of content. So it teaches you how to get started. But we're not the only smart kids on the block. Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as Twitter, so on and so forth, they all have starter guides for people just getting started with the given networks. And they certainly they all have self-serve platforms that hopefully have a good amount of tutorials and guides and videos. So I think that from a purely content standpoint, there's a lot of resources out there that are available to you these days, especially just because of the internet's proliferation to get started. But when it comes to tactically actually getting started on these networks, these guys, they touched on it perfectly. It's really important to start kicking off a few initiatives and really testing and iterating as you get some early data to come in. The one thing that you have to, hopefully not be too scared of is you're going to spend some money, but that's okay, right? Because at the end of the day, as long as your return on ad spend or your ROI, your return on investment, is net positive, then actually that's what's so beautiful about advertising. You can just keep pouring money into it, right? So if, let's say your lifetime value of a customer for your business is $1,000, then even if you spend a couple $100 trying to acquire them, so even if your cost per acquisition or your cost per conversion is a few $100s, you're still in the clear, right? So a lot of things is start with some simple campaigns, start with more evergreen campaigns, which are long-running campaigns that you don't need to run in short flights, and just keep iterating on them and keep adding new pieces of content to them to see how they turn out in the first few weeks. And then you can optimize up and down, try new creative, so on and so forth. But there's tons of guides out there that I highly recommend everybody in the audience check out to get their bearings around the different optimizations they can use.
That's fantastic. So I do have a couple of time for just a couple of more questions. The hour has flown by, so thank you all for that, and thank you for the questions. I had a question come in from Cecil. I thought my content was as unique as my competitors. I thought it was doing better than they were. The brand was ahead, but as time has gone on, customers become more savvy. The variety of competition changes. So what do you see happens when somebody's brand that used to be doing well is doing less well? And I guess this is a toss-up for anyone. And then what can you do about it?
Can I start there? And
Please.
I think it's such a dynamic environment that what you're doing today and that can be incredibly effective will be out of date. In 3-6 months' time, be like, wow, everyone's doing that, and everyone's sort of leapfrogged where I was up to. So we have this sort of standard principle of running multiple pieces of content, getting all of your key messages out into the market, and posting them on your newsfeed and your company page, and then monitoring how they perform. Those that are performing effectively, you can continue to sponsor and amplify out to your target audiences to drive effective outcomes. If they start to not perform well, and you get, like I said earlier, we've got all the analytics to monitor that, you can easily just, drop that post down, stop sponsoring that, and publish new content that you've used the data that you've received from the previous activity to determine what's going to achieve the best outcomes for you. And that's an iterative process. The other thing I would add is that we also have this concept, like Facebook, I think, they're being able to post multiple versions of different pieces of content as well. So you've probably gone to a lot of effort or invested a lot to create the content. So try a number of versions, different headlines, different images, different sort of, focuses of the different articles, so that when you do post them, you can see what's going to get you the greatest cut through and the greatest effectiveness by posting what we call direct sponsored content, which is off the platform, to then A/B test and determine what gives you the best outcomes as well. And that, in time, will help you perform at your optimum. And to keep thinking ahead, keep innovating and thinking about how your brand is going to differentiate itself from the competition.
Yeah. So we have time for just one last question, and so I'm going to combine a question from Adam and Kelly, which is dealing with the content that you're creating. And I think this might be a Facebook question to close, but all of you feel free to chime in. And that is, is it bad practice to just share content that you think is relevant? And how do you means test? And you got into this a little bit, but how do you means test that to find out that you are, in fact, sharing content that your audience cares about and not just what you think your audience cares about?
Yeah, I'd be really wary of just reposting or republishing something that you hope is relevant to you and relevant to your audience, obviously.
I find this funny, therefore,
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes down to really knowing what your main KPI is. Like if it's likes of your post, then putting up a cat photograph, you're probably going to get lots of likes for your post, but that's not going to be sending customers through your door. So again, staying on the objective, what am I trying to do? What content is going to help me achieve that? And yeah, Darren mentioned it before. It's all about A/B testing. So if you do want to figure out if that cat photograph that I've pulled off the internet versus something that I've shot of one of my employees in my store, I can run them both live at the same time to the same audience, and then you learn very quickly, okay, yep, this one's getting more likes, but this one's driving people to my website, or they're clicking on this link that takes them to the learn more page on my website.
Yeah. So I'm going to sneak in one more question because it's a great question that just came under the wire, and I'm going to pose it to you, Sahil, and then we'll wrap up, which is what's your opinion on video? Particularly, I think, in a B2B space, but really even B2C. How effective is it, and does it add anything?
Well, it's a great question to end on. Facebook and actually Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, everyone's really trying to get their video strategy together these days. I think that, the thing about video is it's a very difficult piece of content to create. So it's a little bit, right, there's a higher production value that needs to be associated with it. You always want to create good content, good, crisp content. And so I think that while video is incredibly powerful, and we're going to see more of this happen in the next year and a half, especially this year, video is a big focus for the 3 social networks we talked about today, it is a more difficult piece of content to create. So while it's useful, and I think that, for example, YouTube video advertising is taking off, it's probably, where people are pouring a lot of their money into now for pre-roll and post-roll advertisements. I think it's important to keep in mind that if you're going to go down the avenue of video advertising, make sure that you actually are really investing in creating high production value content. if you don't create the high production value content, you're going to be left wondering why all that time went towards something where one of your promoted posts is just simply performing better, right? So really bullish on video. I'm sure that the Facebook guys are as well. I just think that it's important to keep in mind that it's going to take some time and effort to actually put something great together.
Great. So, Sahil, I want to thank you for taking some time calling in from the Bay Area. By the way, AdStage has graciously offered attendees of this presentation free trial. You'll find out more information about that in an email you'll receive in just a couple of hours. I also want to thank Ross Wakeham from Facebook and Darren Kepi from LinkedIn, both of you for taking some time. We have an obscene amount of questions left. And what I want to do is actually deep dive with each of you and maybe some members of your team to get into some more details because there's a lot that's going on here. I think there's a lot of questions that people still have that we can really dig into. So look for information about that coming up in the future. So a survey is going to pop up for you, but before we you fill out that, thank you very much for taking a few minutes and joining us here in the conversation. Thank you for all of your questions, and thank you especially to the team here at the Customer Insight Center, 400 George Street in Sydney, for helping put this event together. And thank you for, again, taking a few minutes and joining us here on this call. I'm Justin Cleveland, and we'll see you at the next one.